I saw you guys last night. Yeah, her.
He's done that. 2 o'clock in the morning. Just like he lost it. She finally got on the right there on front of it, it's in power button. Power button. Right in front of it once you hit it. I don't think it can get it again. The one far to the right. Exactly. Got trial and error. Yeah, that was actually his wife was James Teacher. I've heard that at the same time. I hear you. States nowhere. How about so that his place from all they want to do is serve him well for sure. Yeah. All right, I got 10 o'clock. Let's get started. Would you mind leading this opening prayer if you don't mind? Yes. Let's get started. Go ahead.
God and Father in heaven, thank you for this day. Father, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Father, thank you for the lesson we're about to hear, and the speakers that teach this quarter. Father, be with them in their study. Pray to be fruitful. Pray that Andy and Lee will be able to lead us in a way that we can grow, further your kingdom. Father, just forgive us all our many sins. Just be with us again through this class today and help us as we continue to walk our walk with you. Father, we love you and ask these things in your Son's name. Amen.
Thanks, Gene.
Leave these doors just so we don't have to hear the noise out and about.
So this concept of expediency is obviously the lesson we're on. It introduces, this lesson content here on this first page. It starts with what we've already been talking about. Some of what we find in the scriptures is very straightforward. Commands are pretty in black and white. We can see those; they stand out pretty well. There are other things, whether it falls into examples, which we talked a lot about last week, or things that might be necessary inferences that are a little, more challenging to discern. We went over Acts chapter 15, where leaders in the faith at that point in time had to come together in Jerusalem to reason through a situation where Christian Jews, were trying to apply Old Testament law into Christianity. And they had to come together and reason through that, which tells us that it's not all as easy as we would like it to be as human beings. And some more so than others would, like it to be spelled out, everything in black and white, such that it's bam, 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 follow this, check this box, check this box, check this box, and I'm good. I'm green. I'm good to go. But that's not how it is, right? So we have to come to grips with that reality, that that's the way it is, and that it's necessary for us to study. It's necessary for us to continuously grow in our understanding of the Scriptures and how God wants us to think. Hence why we come together, on this cadence that we do every Sunday and every Wednesday, to sort through and discern through the Scriptures. And, hopefully we can all embrace that, because it's huge that we understand that that is the reality of the Scriptures and what God wants. I think He purposely wrote the Scriptures that way. He didn't give us that checkbox, which is kind of what the old law was, right? I think there was parts of it. I mean, when you go back to the Ten Commandments, there were parts of the Ten Commandments that, they were explicit, don't do this, don't do that, but there was other pieces of there. But when you got into the specificity of the law, they had to do all of these things, and they had to do them just right. There was such specificity that they could go through and check it off, which, that in itself led the Jews, and it led the scribes and the Pharisees, to the place where they were checking those boxes, and then they went beyond that, and they put in man's thoughts and man's things, what the scribes and Pharisees thought that ought to be there, such that they could get all those green check marks. So, I say all that to say it is very important for us to understand this whole idea that we got to study, we got to dig into the Scriptures, and we got to discern them out. And we got to get comfortable, and we're going to study, as we study through this expediency, we got to get comfortable with sometimes that it can be interpreted differently as to what those next steps should be. And right now, some of you are saying, blasphemy, blasphemy. You can't do that. Well, no, it is, folks. And we're going to, as we study through this expediency, think about that a little bit. When there's not explicit authority or explicit command, an example, or necessary inference, then some things are going to be left up to our judgment. But, as we'll study through in this lesson, what we're going to find out is how do we apply that? And how do we tie it back to what the proper authority ought to be, that it has to be tied to. So, because there's certain things that are not said in the Scriptures. Because the book, if we had everything spelled out for us, the book would be so long you couldn't digest it in your head, right? It had to be a computer program, right, to get all the green check boxes that we as humans would want. So sometimes we're going to reason through that. But we've got a good framework, and we've been studying through that. We're going to continue to study through it. And we look for authority as a command, an example, or necessary inference. Now, let's jump into this study on expediency and see how that fits, because this is a word and a concept that's caused trouble with people. And I'll tell you, to me, this is one of those places where it does get a bit gray, and it can be interpreted differently. Whether it's, we're going to study this example is pretty straightforward. We'll all connect to this. When he told them to go convert the world, teach the world, he didn't tell them how to travel, right? That's one of the key examples in the lesson. And is it okay, to travel however we want to? Or another example we're going to study about is, where do we meet? That's another key example in this lesson. That's not called out anywhere in the scriptures. Yet we have struggles with brethren bringing those things up as big major issues and blowing it up and trying to make that some kind of big deal. And what we want to study as we get to the end of this lesson, what I would hope we would have achieved is learn how to sort that stuff out. What's a big deal, what's not. And then also, and as we've talked about many times, is how would we teach a brother when something is inconsequential? When it is a matter of somebody just making a decision, whether it's an individual Christian or whether it's the elders of a congregation, making a decision that you could go multiple ways. You could get that task done that is aligned, and that's what we're going to study, that is aligned with proper authority for whatever you're supposed to be doing, but it can be done multiple ways, right? And then that's a discernment or in somebody's choice. Does that make sense to everybody? So let's study through this lesson and keep that framework in your mind that this concept called expediency, it's not, and if you've read your lesson, you see the guy called it out here, that this is not an additional way to establish authority, which some have advocated that's what's been happening, trying to use expediency as an additional way. And I certainly don't see that, and that's what our author of this little book is calling out, that expediency is not an additional methodology for establishing authority, but it is a thought process by which we can establish and understand that these things that you'll apply are places where men makes a choice of how you're going to do that. Okay. All right. That's most of the first page in this lesson. Okay, and that's my thought process, and I want to just bring us together in how to think about this, and then we're going to dive in to this idea of expediency. So, does anybody, if you studied your lesson, do you have any questions on that first page? Before, I don't want to just blow by it. If you wanted, if there was something there you thought we ought to talk about, or you had questions about.
Andy, do you think we would define expediency as the same way we would define aid? I think those are kind of one and the same.
I think so. In fact, in our book and when you look into the scriptures, aid, another word for that might be help, right? So yeah, I think it is an aid. You could definitely use that terminology as long as it's tied to something where we find authority, right? And that's what it's doing. It's a method. It's a task or a methodology or some way to accomplish something that we're authorized, or whether it's a command, example, or necessary inference to do. Right? That's what it's about. Good word. And he talks about it down here. Let me grab my pencil. At the bottom of that first page, and he draws a conclusion down here. Timothy was free to choose whichever method of teaching would be most beneficial, most helpful, and most expedient. Does everybody connect to that? He was talking about, he starts here with this example a little bit, about his teaching. What are the different ways that we can teach today that line up with this? So we're teaching the gospel, But what's the different ways we could go about it?
Writing a letter to somebody.
Okay. All right. What else could be under that written? A letter? What other form could that take?
One-on-one study.
Okay, I'm gonna make that a little different.
Okay.
I'm gonna call it one-on-one, personal, definitely. But back up here, thinking in our modern approach, what else could it be besides an old-fashioned letter?
Cards.
Cards, yeah. All right, I'm gonna put cards in that same category.
Email.
Email, that's where I'm gonna go. What else? Text. What else?
A video.
All right, I'm gonna put that down here in a little bit of different video.
He said article. Somebody-
Article, yep. I'll put that one up here. Explode this a little bit expand this on video. What are the possible ways there? What comes to your mind when we think about video?
Facebook.
Podcast.
Keep going. TikTok.
You're getting beyond my abilities.
I'm gonna put YouTube up here. Candidly, that's what we do, right? Here at these shows, we use YouTube.
At one time, I don't feel people doing any more than film strips.
Yep. That would definitely fall under here, wouldn't it? Film strips. It's a little dated, but yeah. What else?
Preaching to the congregation.
Definitely.
What's not to get that one?
What other methodologies? Now, what are all these tied to? Teaching. So if we're aligned that teaching was a direct command, right? We've been through that already. I think we're all aligned with that. The way I think about this is all of these are all okay, right? We would all say, yes, that's comprehension. All of these then would fall under this category, or this way of thinking as expedience. Helps, aids, a way to teach. But I wanted to draw this diagram, and I wanted us to kind of go through this exercise, putting some up here that we're pretty familiar with. But it has to tie back to something that we know is authorized, and that it's supported, it's an aid, it's helpful, it's to that end, right? And not to something else. And it doesn't, stand on its own, and it's not an addition or a modification of what the Lord has given us in the Scriptures. It has to be tied to something that, as we've been studying, command, example, or necessary inference, in one of those buckets. One of those that says we're authorized. Okay? Now, and we need to be able to sort this out. To say, what do we find in the Scriptures? And then how does what we're doing tie back to that? Does that make sense? And hopefully, if you can write it down on a piece of paper, sometimes visually, especially for me, when I diagram something out like this, it makes a lot better sense. And I think it will be, and I think this is one methodology, and I want you to think about this as we study this. This is one methodology you can easily teach somebody. Because we can go back to, whether it's Matthew 28, right? And many other verses where we're told to go out and teach, right? So you can say, go to the Scriptures, bum, 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 here's where we're to teach. Every one of these or methodologies of teaching. Now, what's not? Let's say if we were kind of in this same vein of thinking, what's one that is prevalent, let's say, in the world, let's say the denominational world, because otherwise just use that in context, that might fall under this, that some people would advocate this as an expedient. Let's do a not a trick question. I'm not looking for anything fancy here.
Having a meal before Wednesday night.
Okay.
Services to get everybody there so that they can get the teaching.
Like Lee was talking about in his lesson this morning, basketball courts. Are these teaching? Now, some people are making, we're going to rationalize through this. Some people will say, well, what I'm doing is I'm figuring out a way to get them there so that I can teach them.
Bait and hook.
Bait and hook. That's a good way to think about it, right? That's what I'm doing. But does that line up with teaching? Our judgment says no. Because the Lord's got a different methodology for how do you get them there. The Lord wants the people to want to be there. He wants it to be in their mindset seeking Him. He didn't give us anywhere in the Scriptures, hey, bait the hook with a meal or anything like that. In fact, we find some places where He says, don't bait the hook with a meal. Right? 1 Corinthians 11. The Christians there got so caught up in the distraction with their meals and their drinking and, socializing, because they all got to go in cliques, right? That's what's happening in 1 Corinthians 11. And he said, you lost focus because of, it started with those meals probably with good intentions, right? And he said, you have digressed. You have lost focus in 1 Corinthians 11. And he's very specific with that. So I would tell you, when they try to tie that to there, say, whoa, wait a minute. That don't match up with directly teaching. That's going beyond. And we got scripture that says, and we got examples in the New Testament that says, these kind of things lead to loss of focus because these are thought up by man. And people get so hung up, whether it's, I like sports, so I'm going to go to this church because they got a basketball court. I like to socialize. So they have meals where we can all socialize together, right? So I'll go to that church because on Wednesday nights before services, they're going to have a meal so I can have a good meal, I can socialize and all that sort of stuff. Again, that'll take you right, if you think about that just a minute, that'll take you right to 1 Corinthians 11 where those Christians, they got sideways because they lost their focus. Just like all the times in the Old Testament where the Israelites lost focus, right? They started down these little paths, digressing a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, and every third and fourth generation they'd be totally gone because they got distracted with all that stuff. I tell you, and the way I think about it is the essence of our God is simplicity. If we stay focused with our relationship and doing what God says do and keep it pretty simple, you can do pretty good. I think that's one reason oftentimes the common man, sometimes it's referred to in the scriptures as the poor man, would tend to do better because they are a little more simple than the rich man. And the Lord calls it out. The rich man, threaded through the eye of the needle of the camel, right? So I get all that. You know what I mean about the rich man. It's more difficult because they got all those distractions going on, right? So these expedients, And this whole subject can be a big distraction. So it's a watch out. That's one reason I think it's in this, in our lesson book. It's a part of our authority study, that there's things out here in the world, things among the brotherhood in the churches of Christ that get all hung up in these distractions called expedience. Okay? Make total sense. Anybody add anything else?
Sitting on plays or production, or musical.
Come back and see it.
So sitting on plays or musical production.
Uh-huh. Good one. That's something I love. Kristen will tell you, I love musicals. And you can learn a lot through, the interaction of music. We as humans can. But we can find that authorized anywhere, do we? It's so easy to get on that distraction. Celia?
I was just going to say, in the teaching, I think the fact that we support other preachers who are able to teach around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very integral part of what we do as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that's probably not anything about that one, but I'm going to put that one as extension of gospel preaching around the world from our congregation here. I think we find that authorized. Now, you got two elders sitting in here. What do y'all think we do when it comes to how we make a choice for this? Do you think we do a good bit of vetting to find out if this is just going to be teaching, or is some of those funds going into something like this or many of these other distractions?
I would hope that you are.
Yeah, I will tell you, your elders do here. We put a good bit of effort, and we'll go at it, multiple different ways to try to make sure we're finding out, and also checking up and making sure that we stay on this path back to here, and that our funds and money and the people that we're supporting, that's what they're doing, and they're not getting distracted with other things, which could be, kind of get distracted with some of these things that fall into these expedients. All right.
It's also sad to me too now to go by and see a Church of Christ sign out in front of the building and know that those people inside that building are having meals and are doing basketball and all that stuff. It's sad to know that Church of Christ have changed in the world.
Mm-hmm. So let's take that and as we go through the lesson, think about how we're going to teach people when that opportunity arises and you get the good question, or they ask, why do you do what you do? Be able to teach it. Let's think about it that way. All right, let's dive into some more of the mechanics and the details. But I wanted to start with that, and we'll probably try to end with that. Now let's work through some of the mechanics, the scriptures, and how we develop our thinking and understanding, and then how we teach it. So the word expedient is in the Bible. First of all, some people say it's not there at all, but you can see in your lesson. Let's go to John 11 and 50. Who would like to read that for us? In fact, I think we'll read some verses around that. So, go ahead.
That is expedient for us, that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not.
Okay. So, what's the context here? Who's saying this? If you look back up in 49, it's Caiaphas. the high priest at the time. And he's addressing, I think this is the Sanhedrin, right? At least this group of Jewish leaders, and he's using the word expedient to say it's okay to sacrifice one life to preserve the whole. Now, he's coming at it from a Jewish perspective, saying, hey, it's okay that we justify amongst ourselves to kill this man, basically, is what they're saying, right? That it's expedient, he's using the terminology, to their end goal. And their end goal was to preserve Judaism. And we believe, just by all the context and everything, they were trying to preserve their power and a lot of other things versus, actually they knew the scriptures and knew the Savior was coming. But I think they got sideways and they're saying, hey, this is expedient, that it's okay, we kill one man, to preserve their way of life and the old law and all of that sort of thing. So we do find the word expedient. I'm in the New King James, and we've got all these other verses, whether it's 16:7. Let's flip down to 18:4. It's basically that's the same thing. 18 and verse 4. 18:14. Sorry, 14. So now it was, as Caiaphas, who had advised the Jews that it was expedient that one man should die for the people. Same kind of thing. Now, in the King James Version, there are other passages that use that language. Let's go to 2 Corinthians 8 and 10. A little different situation here. Who wants to read that? And tell me what version you're reading. I'll flip back to the King James Version.
When I was doing a study on this lesson, I went back and on my phone, I have a Bible app, and I looked them all up under the King James, and every one of them had the word expedient.
Yep.
In
those passages. Who wants to read that right quick for me?
2 Corinthians what?
8 and 10.
I got it in New King James. And herein I give my advice, for this is expedient for you who have been begun before, not only to do, but also to be forward a year ago.
Okay. And what does the other versions use?
I've got English Standard.
What word does it put in there?
And in this matter, I give my judgment, this benefits you, who a year ago started not only to do this work, but also to desire to do it.
Okay. And the New King James, so it was an advantage. That's what the New King James uses there in that passage as well, is advantage. Anybody find anything different than those two? I didn't go through all of the versions.
This one says desire.
It's in place of advantage.
Benefits.
Benefits. I think that's the word.
Benefits.
Benefits. Yeah. Benefits. I think that's one.
That's it.
All right. So, which, all of these, but we got listed on the board, would be benefits, helps, or aids in teaching. All right. So how the context and how they're being used in the scriptures lines up with our thinking. This is where we get our thinking about expedients that are there. All right. Let's go down to in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 10:23.
It's almost like, I have to just see it, in all the examples that you've given,
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like it's saying, instead of expedient, it's a plus, it's an advantage, it's a benefit, like that is the synonym, that is
Mhm.
using
Yep.
in regards to expedient.
Yep. I think that's a good way to think about it. In fact, I might put that up here on my little drawing, right? This would be a plus, 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 right? Yeah. All right, let's go to 1 Corinthians 10 and verse 23. And we got Paul here addressing what subject? What's he talking about in 10:23?
You need offer to idols.
Yep. All right. Who wants to read that? I need a reader. Somebody give me a hand right quick.
All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but not all things edify.
All right. So we got helpful, which we've been talking about. We think it's a plus. Now, what other descriptor does he throw in here in that passage right there in that last phrase?
Build up.
Edify, build up, encourage. So there's another part of this concept that Paul's talking about. Is this a good thing? Does it build up? Does it make people feel good? Right? But go back to the first part of that passage. What does he say? And he's very careful, I think. I think he's very specific here. Lawful, right? He ties it back to authority, which is the same thing we're doing, right? We tie it back to what something we know is authorized, which is what Paul's saying. Now, let's read on. I want to read on through this a little bit. What does Paul say? Let's who would like to read on down through the end of the chapter there? Let's read this concept. We'll talk about it in just a minute. Who would like to read on through that? Come on, folks.
All right, are you talking about 24?
Yes.
Down?
Keep going right on down to the end of the
No
chapter.
one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. Anything that is sold in the meat market without asking questions for one's conscience, say, for the earth is the Lord's and all it contains. If one of the unbelieving invite you and you want to go, eat anything that is set before you without asking question for conscience sake. But if anyone says to you, this meat is sacrificed to idols, do not eat it, for the sake of the one who informed you and for conscience sake. I mean not your own conscience, but the other man's, for why is my freedom judged by another's conscience? If I partake with thankfulness, why am I slandered concerning them for which I give thanks? Whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do all for the glory of God. Give no offense either to Jews or to Greeks or to the church of God, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of the many, so that they may be saved.
So Paul walks us through a way to think about this, right? He says, first of all, we tie it back to something that's lawful. Is this idea of eating meat lawful or unlawful? Or neither? Not trick questions here, folks.
It was one of those things, it was okay to do or not to do.
It's lawful.
The correct the correct answer is neither, right? It's neither lawful or unlawful. It was man's choice, and that's what Paul tells us right here. You can eat meat. And he says, don't even ask a question about it, right? He's telling you how to think about that, right? And, you know, the principle he's given us here, which we strongly abide by, is if this is not edifying a brother, or this is being a distraction for a brother, or being a problem for a brother, what's he say to do? Don't do it, right? But there's nothing unlawful about this. So somebody sitting here versus somebody sitting in the Philippines. Some people here may not eat meat because it's a distraction for somebody else. But in the Philippines, it's not, so they eat meat. Is that wrong? Is that different? Are we violating the Lord's law by those two men that call themselves Christians doing it differently? Nope, it's not. That's part of the lesson here. But as you become aware, or you know it's going to be a problem for somebody else, you don't do it, right? That's what Paul's teaching us here. So this is one of those places that we get to make choices about what we do, but we can't do stuff that's going to be a problem for somebody else. That's going to distract them. Does that make sense? It's a complex thing, and for Christians that are early Christians, this is a problem area, and it's a problem area for even people that are very intellectual that can come read Paul's words right here about this issue and still not get it and apply it correctly. I've had some of those conversations with some folks that have really high intellects, real high IQs, but they wanted to do what they wanted to do, despite it, being directly told that will hinder a brother. They chose that they wanted to continue to do that behavior in front of other brethren, when being told that's going to lead people astray. Not wrong, and we had that part of the discussion, that it was not wrong, right or wrong. It's a neither. You can have that, but if you do it in front of these people, or include these people, that's going to be a hindrance and distraction, and people are going to be hindered from God and are going to lose their faith over this. And when you see that behavior, folks, that is a real problem, because a brother has chosen to be in violation of what the principle Paul is teaching here, about that choice I get to make. It's a liberty I have, aka could be an expedient, but it's going to hinder somebody else because I'm not going to edify. And in fact, I'm going to be a distraction, and I'm going to potentially lead a brother astray. We all good on that concept? And we understand why we wouldn't do it? And why we wouldn't condemn somebody else for doing that same thing? Because it may not be a hindrance for them or the people they're around. And so you'll have to, goes into us having to dig into the scriptures and discern it and be mature. And be careful about, condemning, this is my practice, I've chosen that. Somebody else may have chosen something differently, and condemning them, and we have brethren that sometimes try to take that and make it a command, example, or necessary inference and bring it back over here into this category and leverage that because that's the way they think. And that happens in the church. I've seen that. Okay? Does that make sense to everyone? Where somebody tries to take something that's a preferential thing or a choice and try to bring it back up under a command, example, or necessary inference. Or in other words, where we clearly have established authority. Now, this qualifier that's in Paul's, principle here about edification is an added, let's say, requirement, right, that we have to be conscious of, especially mature Christians. Immature Christians, young in the faith, this concept is going to be probably not well understood for a while. This takes some maturity digging into the scriptures to really understand that.
Well, and they also have to recognize the fact that other people come before us in our thoughts. I mean, and that's what's missing in our world today.
Mm-hmm. It is not, we call that being humble, right? That is not a prevalent concept in a lot of the world today. Now, I'll tell you in the business world, you know, some people, you know, probably 20, 25 years ago, figured out that, you know, what's been taught in the scriptures, what Jesus taught. You remember last week we looked at, you know, Jesus is washing feet and that example of servant leadership. They figured out, that works. And the Lord taught us that the whole time. Being humble, you know, and serving our fellow man in all different ways. It works.
Andy, is it fair to, just for clarification, to point out, if something offends a brother, it's offensive if they make it known. I mean, it's hard to say I offended somebody when I didn't knowingly offend them without them telling me that it offended them. Does that make sense? In other words,
yes, it does.
It creates an obligation for the person who is offended by it to make known, okay, I don't know if I can, I mean, I think it's fair to say, it's hard for me to say I'm going to cause a brother to stumble if I had no idea that what they were stumbling with, they didn't make known to me, correct?
I think that is a good practice.
That's a fair statement.
I think it's very fair.
And it would be is for that person to make known, hey, this is not something consciously that I'm, okay, then we don't do it. You know, when you knowingly, as you said, you knowingly say, okay, I know this is going to cause a brother to stumble, and I'm going to choose to keep doing it. That's where the problem is.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
that is. But there is a principle, so let's play that out a little bit, what Gene's talking about if you're offended by something, what is the biblical principle that you should apply? Go immediately to that brother only first, right? So if we get that principle and we are offended by something and you follow that, then you'll go to that brother and you'll have a conversation.
Just want to,
and it'll be helpful. No, that's a
assumption is made, but it's
well, but it's not easily practiced. That part of our Christianity is probably one of the most prevalent and difficult things in application that we as humans wind up straying from many times. And I can track you through some very, very difficult situations that would have been thwarted if that would have been versus it got ugly, exploded, it impacted, you know, several hundred people. But if we'd have got that principle right in our execution as Christians, as brothers and sisters to each other, we wouldn't let Satan drag all that out and explode that one issue that affected a whole lot of people.
I was just going to say, I think there's another side to that. Because if, as a young Christian, you see a more mature Christian behaving a certain way, you begin to think that's correct. And so I don't know that I would know you're causing me to stumble to tell you that, but that I'm just following along with your Christian example. And you, as a mature Christian, should be able to, I don't know, discern the behaviors that you are professing in front of your fellow Christians are not following along with God's word. I don't know. I'm just putting it back.
No, you don't know that if eating meat there's nothing unlawful about eating meat. You don't know that you're eating meat in front of somebody if it's not unlawful.
But I thought you were putting the onus on me to say to you,
if you
you're
are
causing
offended.
me to stumble.
But I think where you're going
Uh-huh.
is what Lee preached this morning.
Yes.
Right? But I think that's where you're going. But if we as mature Christians try to set ourselves apart and lead by example, we will do those things that are good, wholesome, edify, encourage, and are positive to them.
What I'm clarifying is, just for my sake, is if eating meat is not unlawful, so I'm not sinning by eating meat.
Yep.
then the only way I know, if I invited you over to my house and we eat meat and I had no idea that that offended you, how am I responsible for making sure I didn't offend you if you didn't tell me that eating meat offended you?
Yeah, that's reasonable. Yeah, that's reasonable.
Because it's in relation, now, we're not talking about things like baptism and things that we know are strictly commanded. We're talking about things that are in this area.
Yeah, things that are our choices.
That are our choices.
Yes. Yes.
That's all.
No, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good? All right, look, I know we spent a lot of time, on some higher level. Finish your lesson if you hadn't done it. There's some more good examples we'll